Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, where we'll be exploring the theme of building a future-ready finance function. Of course, you'll get to hear insights into how digital transformation is driving success for finance teams and how businesses can be empowered to be more agile and responsive, and as such, more resilient to the ever-changing business climate we're all facing. As you'd expect today, we will have the lens firmly focused on people, collaboration, technology, processes, and data. My name is Rupert McGrath, and I'm Delivery Services Director at Clarivos. For those that don't know us, the very core of our value proposition is that we provide technology consulting today that empowers, innovates, and transforms the office of the CFO for tomorrow. Finance is very much in our DNA. We've been doing this for over 20 years with many long-standing customers as well, where we're still supporting CFOs, continue to be drivers of innovation. They are ultimately the growth drivers and value creators, which they now need to be more than ever. We are implementing what we think now would be our fourth generation of finance tools, which is rather apt, given that we're at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution 4.0. Now, before we begin, if you have any questions you'd like to raise, please don't hesitate to get in contact either with our Clarivos LinkedIn page, connect with me, or visit our Contact Us website page, or email info@clarivos.com. Now, so as backdrop to this session, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to Patrick Nicholas, Sales Director at CCH Tagetik. Good afternoon, Patrick, and thanks for making the time to be with us today.
Good afternoon, Rupert. Thanks very much for having me.
Great. Now, perhaps you could give a brief introduction of yourself, of CCH Tagetik, and how we work together.
Yeah, sure. So I am the Sales Director for CCH Tagetik UK. A bit about Tagetik. So we are part of the Waters Kluwer Group. So that's, for those of you that don't know, is a big kind of $5 billion turnover multinational kind of media and software organization. Waters Kluwer is split into 5 different divisions, and CCH Tagetik sits as a business unit in what we call the tax and accounting division. CCH Tagetik alone has around 1,500 customers globally, and our core value proposition, if you like, is that we have a single platform to support digital transformation in the office of the CFO and beyond, as we will discuss today. And every single one of our customers uses that same platform, and very pleased to work with Clarivos as a key partner in the UK, managing not just our customers, but some of our biggest implementations traditionally as well.
Thanks, Patrick. So, in terms of agenda, first we'll be speaking with Patrick, getting his insights on the challenges the Office of the CFO faces, and how finance teams can leverage technology in their acceleration to be future ready. And after our chat, we'll be rolling into the first in a series of demo use cases. The first one will showcase predictive intelligence and visualization capabilities within a modern finance tool, and their increasing role and use with forward-looking finance teams. So, Patrick, first question. In your role, you're positioned very close to customers, to prospects, and often it's the finance leaders, the sponsors and visionaries of finance transformation programs that you're interacting with. So to kick off, I'd like you to share with us, please, what you think are the common themes and trends you're hearing from the market that's driving a modernization of the finance function.
So I think I'll tackle this question by splitting it into 2 parts. So that would be, what we're seeing in terms of customers coming to us and the goals and the outcomes for their digital transformation projects or journeys. And then I guess what's driving that? What is the trigger or the event that causes a company to want to go through that transformation process? So if we look at the goals or the outcomes first, probably no real surprises in what people are looking for. I think that one of the key things is around simplification. And again, I'll split that in 2 areas. So the first one will be greater ease of use and self-service. So if you think about the types of tools that finance users particularly use day in, day out, Well, actually they don't use them day in, day out. They use, more often than not, maybe perhaps once a month, once a quarter. So, it's quite easy to kind of lose track of how to use a specific tool, especially if it's quite complicated or involves like quite a lot of interaction from the end user. So to try and make it more prescriptive in the way that organizations and users kind of interact with it is a key driver. And things like self-service reporting as well, because again, this idea of not having to be reliant on a third party to try and create the information that you need, just to have that at your fingertips to be able to create reports is a real driver for people as well. So almost putting the power and the data in the hands of the user. So that's kind of simplification one. And the other one is around kind of rationalizing the number of tools. So, I think we've seen almost every company is guilty of perhaps sleepwalking into quite a complicated architecture. So in the past, it's always been very siloed in the number of tools that companies have used. It's been very difficult to take a proper kind of end-to-end view. And you almost get these very different tools. Some are on premise, some are in the cloud, and you almost get like full-time people that are acting as human interfaces to transfer data in between these applications. So it's hugely inefficient and drives a lot of dissatisfaction in those accountants, because that's not what they came into the job to do. So I think that then leads on to the next point, which is around efficiencies and just doing things faster or better. So we get a lot of companies coming to us asking us, we make a big deal about the fact that we've got 1,500 companies, some of the biggest in the world. And so that, they want us to make recommendations about facilitating best practice. What does that look like? How do we build that into our system, rather than them having to, start from scratch and kind of develop their own. And facilitating a better process, taking advantage of things like technology changes. So, things like in-memory computing for us, Rupert, is, it's not a new thing, is it? But a lot of companies that are on these types of legacy applications, they take ages to do a consolidation, they take ages to do perform a calculation. So being able to take advantage of new technological change that's kind of changing all the time, I think that's a real big driver for companies as well.
Yeah.
The next one I'd say is probably around looking to improve data quality and switching to data-enabled decision making. So there's a lot of huge noise around big data analytics. Well, I think really what that means is the ability to just have high-level information and the ability to drill down into those numbers without then having to go off for a couple of hours or ask a different department to give you the information that you need. Kind of having everything in a centralized repository to be able to drill down and get the information you need and interact with that data. Kind of like we talked about with the self-service is a big driver. I know we'll kind of talk about the concept of business partnering a little bit later, but again, part of this is about finance providing the information that's needed to the business and being able to react and be almost proactive with the information that they provide. And I think that the last one, which is probably less prevalent, but certainly the organizations that I see as being the most forward thinking are those that are kind of thinking, okay, well, perhaps we'll have a 12 to 18 month transformation. It might be longer than that, it might be a few years, but what do we do after that? And this idea of a culture change towards continuous improvement. So, we can talk a bit about the cloud and how that facilitates that. So, it shouldn't be just every 5 years you're reevaluating your technology stack because you've depreciated the capex investment. It should be a continuous evaluation of what you're doing, keeping track of the process, of the data, of new innovations. It's incumbent upon organizations like Clarivos and CCH Tagetik, Rupert, to demonstrate that level of information, isn't it? That's kind of one of the big changes that we've seen in cloud, because it's a subscription-based model. The customers, there's placing an even greater onus on us to demonstrate that type of information, so that every year when they come to renew, they're really saying, well, what can you bring that's new to the table? So I think those are kind of sort of the 4 or 5 categories that I'd see. And then probably what's driving the change or the trigger is.
That's what I wanted to bring up, actually, because obviously it's no secret that the disruption to the global commercial environment caused by the pandemic is put this sort of organization agility top of a CFO's agenda. No secret, businesses can't allow themselves to be caught off guard anymore. So that aside, I'm sort of keen to know what you think other triggers of change are, please.
Yeah, and I think it's a good question. And I think, when we come into the process, quite often it's like, here's what we're trying to do, or here's our functional list of things that we want this system to do. But actually what's more important for us to understand is actually exactly as you say, what's driving that change, because that can really come from anywhere. So, and again, we could probably spend 20 minutes talking about any one of these topics, but it could be, for example, just a burning platform. So I've seen a lot of the I guess traditional players in the market just come out of supports, Hyperion, HFM, BPC, Cognos. We see a lot of companies that have just said, we just haven't paid support for 4 years, and that's a huge risk to our business. It could be that actually there's been an audit, because audit love the low-hanging fruit of end user computing controls, account reconciliation, anything that's done manually. And either their external audit, their internal audit, or even the audit committee might just say they don't have any confidence in their internal controls and they refuse to sign off the numbers. We've seen that before. It could be something simple like the CFO just wants quicker, more accurate reporting, and we can dive in a bit later as the fact that it seems on the surface like quite a straightforward request, but actually once you dip underneath that, that's a huge undertaking to try and provide that. And then a couple of other things, perhaps more on the macro level. So it could be a significant change in ownership. So a company gets bought out. We've seen big FTSE 100 companies split in two, and that's been a driver for them changing their landscape or reevaluating. They might have had a very acquisitive landscape and kind of almost like sleepwalked into that very disparate architecture that we mentioned earlier. Or it could be a change in regulation. We work with big companies. Again, we can talk about this a little bit later, but things like IFRS 17, that was a very fundamental change to the way that insurers manage the way that revenue is recognised both on the P&L and the balance sheet. So it drove a lot of them to kind of look at the way their chart of accounts is structured, and then off the back of that to re-look at their existing systems. So a lot of these kind of come to the fore as we kind of dig into these companies, but I think a lot of these are what is driving a lot of that change.
Absolutely. I mean, Patrick, just back to your point around acquisitive landscape. I mean, there is even many examples of some of our customers which maybe a private company, they're doing an IPO, suddenly their reporting needs to change radically, and that might indeed mean systems need to be evaluated in a different way as well. So and where extra data needs to reside. So it is this forward thinking, and that is a continuous process, because you never know what's around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't necessarily think it's a driver for the change sometimes, but I have seen a shift in the way that people are looking at their finance systems. Because I mean, to be honest, this was pointed out to me probably a few years ago when I first started in software, the fact that people interact with cloud-based tools all the time, whether they know it or not, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever it might be. And in the past, there's been an acceptance, well, finance systems are really complicated, they're difficult to use. But now you're seeing people kind of evaluate the usability of their tools in the same way that they do the tools that they use every day. Organizations and companies that we compete with in our sort of corporate performance management space, they love that analogy, don't they, Rupert, of the smartphone and the platform. That's been done to death. I'm not going to go down that route. But the thing that's really interested me over the last couple of years is not just the fact that you've got a smartphone as a platform, you have lots of different apps, but how the smartphone has really replaced so many other tools just in my day-to-day life. So in the last 2 years, it's replaced my thermostat. I very often, I can just drive to the shop and buy stuff, and I'll just take my phone with me. I don't need my cards. I don't need my wallet. I don't even need my car keys anymore, because I can use my phone to get into my car and start the ignition, which is something that I never thought would happen, 3 or 4 years ago. And again, I think companies are taking that kind of knowledge of saying, okay, well, if the phone can replace so many different things, let's be more demanding about the tools that we're looking at. It shouldn't just be a consolidation system or a reconciliation system or a planning tool. It should be all of those things and more.
I couldn't agree more. It's driving that consumer behavior and the traits that we expect now that come hand in glove with our everyday life. Yes, they're demanding a lot more from vendors like yourselves, right? In the roadmap and the usability of these products.
Yeah, definitely. And it's obviously it's a mixed bag. It's good and it's bad. It's great that when companies are very demanding of us, but also it gives us an opportunity to really showcase what we do, because quite often accountants are pigeonholed as number crunchers that are only looking at the historical results. But the most ambitious projects, I would say, are those that are looking to automate as much of the actual process as is possible, in order to focus on being more analytical and forward thinking, and to the theme of this webinar, to be future ready.
Yeah, absolutely. So future ready, exactly. It's that future readiness that what that actually means for a finance function, and why is that important for organizations today? Now, you touched on a couple of those themes. I mean, Patrick, if you could expand a little bit about the agility point, because I know cloud platform very much is that the foundation for agility. So could you just perhaps expand on what that future readiness means for a finance function?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about the onus to be on the vendors and the providers to be more innovative, which I think is a really positive thing. But I think for the business in itself, it's more fundamental, isn't it? It's about the fact that it's now extendable and expandable. You don't have to worry about supporting the infrastructure and all the costs and pains that come with that. Even things like taking regular backups, all of that stuff is all sorted for you in a single, straightforward subscription-based method. And, I think a lot of companies have said, well, we outsource things like a lot of our transactional accounting and some of our IT. So therefore, why wouldn't we go down the route of saying, you're the vendor, your software best, you are best placed to be able to support that for you. And that's, again, that's been a very positive change, I think, in the way that people evaluate staying on top of the latest versions. Again, new innovations can make their way into the products and people take advantage of them much more quickly. And a part of that is the move towards more configurability, because you can't have a cloud-based platform that still requires a huge amount of scripting or bespoke custom coding. That's not software as a service. That's infrastructure or platform as a service. We're talking about software as a service. It has to be configurable. You shouldn't be relying on huge heavy scripting or custom bespoke coding. And what that means, again, to your point, Rupert, on agility, is that finance teams can own the applications themselves, so they don't have to come to a third party. And we really make a big play about that within our projects. And I know that's a big thing for Clarivos as well, embracing people that are going to own the application from the start so that they are trained up, this concept of a train the trainer, so that they can take on the day-to-day management of the tool and, actively look for new processes to put into the system. And I think, without laboring another overused point around COVID, one of the interesting things for me around that is that it really underlined the need to have systems that are readily accessed from anywhere. Because this time, March last year, I'm in sales. We were looking at our pipeline and we're thinking, goodness me, obviously we didn't use those exact words, goodness me, there's a real challenge here. Are people going to be buying software? But actually what happened was it actually supported the business case, because people saw, and actually for the first time, a lot of these things bubbled to the surface where so many spreadsheets were being used. And if people are now working from home, you can't support that model. You have to have a centralized tool that's readily accessed basically from anywhere. So COVID really underlined that. And again, the other point about COVID was it really, we've been harping on about this idea of moving to a rolling forecast or regular planning and embracing everybody within that plan. But again, COVID absolutely made that a necessary part of the regular cycle. It wasn't good enough just to do, a yearly budget or a yearly forecast. You had to move to a very regular forecast and a rolling forecast type model, which is very painful for a lot of companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, something again on that COVID backdrop of what's accelerated or I'd say sharpened the thinking here is key person dependency. So we very much saw the spotlight on I suppose identification of manual tasks that can and should be automated better, even if there may have been reluctance or pushback before. I think we've very much seen it, something that was languishing down a priority list, now very much at the sort of another top priority. And this has all presented that sort of opportunity for change and focus on efficiency. So it's wrapped with so many other points here, and hence many meetings. So it's been a very, very busy 2 years in that regard, and it continues to be so.
Absolutely, it's a really good point around the automation as well, because it's not just about the automation of the low value activities, which is what a lot of people focus on, is loading of data, running the calculations or whatever it might be, but it's actually looking ahead to machine learning and predictive. There's a stage ahead of that where you can almost have like a rules-based process where the system is proactively identifying the areas that you should be focusing your attention on. So we see this around things like the attestation or substantiation of the balance sheet. So not just kind of automating things like zero balance accounts or the low-hanging fruit within that process, but it's about saying this account has $1 million on it, that now becomes a high risk account, focus your attention on that. Or even in consolidation, moving through that idea of predictive and machine learning, looking at the historical behaviour of your actuals, and then saying, okay, well, looking forward, or in this month, this item doesn't look right, and actually proactively notifying people rather than spending all the time trying to identify where those risks or issues might be. The system then proactively notifies them to you, and then you can take that analysis and that's more greater focus on the analysis and the resolution of those issues. So that is a big part of being future ready. And I think the final point that I'd make here again is just around compliance. Not obviously the most exciting of topics when you can be talking about cloud and predictive and machine learning, but for the Office of Finance, it's such a huge thing. I joined CCH Tagetik just over 4 years ago. And at that stage, we were looking at the new lease accounting rules, IFRS 16, to be introduced. And for some companies, it wasn't a big thing, but we probably had about 10 or 15 big FTSE 100 companies working with us purely on IFRS 16. And the technical accounting director of one of those big FTSE 10 companies, really, not even FTSE 100, says that for him, it was the biggest change in accounting he'd seen in 30 years within that specific organisation. So it was huge for them. After that, then we saw IXBRL having to come in and the ESEF mandate for publishing in the sort of EU taxonomy for your group reports, and then looking forward, it's likely to have UK SOX coming around the corner. And if we learn anything from US SOX, is that it was pretty draconian, right? And the things that affected finance most were things like SOX 404 and 302, where it was very focused on their internal control framework. Again, that concept of a bigger focus on reconciling and attestation around the balance sheet was a big focus there, and we're likely to kind of see that kind of come to the fore with UK SOX. And then the next big thing, if that wasn't enough, is going to be ESG, with COP26.
So what does ESG stand for?
So ESG is around environmental social governance. So it's going to be a real, it's not necessarily a new thing, and to a certain extent it's kind of a trend that's been going on over the last few years. But it's a huge topic, and it's going to really fundamentally change all external reporting and planning. So again, that's way beyond just sort of mining companies and energy companies, right? It's going to be de facto for everybody. Yeah, I mean, initially it's going to affect a lot of companies that just have investments, so like in the banking, but then you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to be expanded out beyond that as well, because we're going to be seeing things like SFDR kind of coming in, which is the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation next year. 2023, there's going to be obligations under Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. That's probably just going to be the start. So there are huge things that are going to be coming, and if you're talking about finance ready, making sure that you can meet the needs of environmental and social governance is going to be a huge thing.
Absolutely. So future ready then, Patrick, in that regard, is you need to have the right foundations in place, right, to capture all those different data points, getting your hands on less structured data, having somewhere to put it, putting it in the right place, good large volumes of data, quality of the data, and then you touched earlier on the sort of predictive, but data surely is the necessary fuel for artificial intelligence to work its magic. So it's that data which is obviously and has been a limiting factor, good quality granular data and solid process wrapped around it that is the common theme and keeps knocking on the door to lots of companies and will continue to do so.